The church is an institution, and a spiritual institution at that. And so, everyone that is in the church must understand that God established the church as an institution to function in his kingdom, which means he also wants people to walk in this institution called the church. And these people who are working in this institution are called church workers. Whether from the apostle or the bishop, down to the usher, the choristers, the men's fellowship leader, the youth leader, the children's leader, and every other departments in the church, once you are appointed to function in any of these capacities in the church, you are considered to be a church worker. And as a church worker, you must also understand there are qualifications that you must possess to fit into that office of being a church worker. This message will have a part 1, and we have a part 2, or even part 3. And I would like you to follow up to understand the basics and the qualification of becoming a church worker. I want to first of all look at a scenario in the Old Testament, and that is in the book of Daniel, chapter 1. If you begin to read from verse 3 to 4, you will see a clear and vivid representation of the people who are to stand to function in the palace of the king, which is a type of the church in the New Testament. Don't forget, the kingdom of God, or the kingdom, belongs to Christ, and Christ is the king of the kingdom. And those that must walk in this kingdom must function with certain levels of qualification before the king. That is why it is important to listen and to understand this very lecture. In Daniel chapter 1, from verse number 3 to 4, the king called on the eunuch and instructed him that he would need some young men that will come and stand in his palace to function and to walk before him. Now, the king gave 3 specifications of where or from where these people must be taken from. He says, look for these guys from the Israelites. Look for them from the king's seed, and look for them amongst the princes. So these guys that must stand before me must come from the Israelites, or from Israel, must come from the king's seed, and must come from the princes. Now, this carries very deep significance. Why did the king mention these 3 classes to look for these people that must function in the palace? Listen to this. Israel is a covenanted nation with God. So those that must come in my palace to work as my workers must have a covenant with God. Number 2, you will look for those that must come from the king's house. The king represents power and authority. They must come from the place or the house of the prince. Prince also represent honor and dignity. These are the 3 places you must select the people that will come and stand before me. If you export that to the New Testament, you find out that anyone that must be a church worker in the kingdom of Christ must come from a specific class, and that class is the class of being born again. We cannot just pick people to be workers in the church that are not born again. They must come from a regenerated class, a class that are converted, the class that is being born again, or else you are going to have problems if you bring people who are outside that class. Number 2, if you read verse 4, you begin to see the qualifications that the king placed before the eunuch for these people that must walk in the kingdom. Number 1, he said they must possess these specific qualities. 1, no blemish. Coming to my presence to walk, they must have no blemish in them. They must be spotless, which means no darkness, no deception, no hypocrisy, no pretense. There must be people who have good reports, who are honest, who have been tested to know that these guys are honest. Number 2, they have to be well favored, which means they must have good appearance. They must be healthy looking people. They must be people who take care of themselves. They are not haggard, they are not tattered, they are not indecent people, irresponsible, but they must be people who are well favored, good looking, having smiling face and face that would welcome visitors and not to repel visitors. Number 3, he said they must be skillful in all wisdom. These people must not be a novice. They must not be foolish people, senseless people, people who talk anyhow, who are uncontrolled, who have no discipline and cannot handle conflicts with wisdom. They must be skillful in all wisdom. Number 4, he said they must be cunning in knowledge. These guys must have some level of knowledge. They may not be an adroit, but they must have and possess level of knowledge. And one of the greatest part of knowledge is having the knowledge to always learn. They must have this open-mindedness. They must have the spirit to learn and improve in their lives. They must have knowledge. Number 5, they must have understanding in science. Now remember that science is discovery, which means these people must understand the practical fact that research is important, improvement is important, discovering new things that will add value to the palace where they are working is critical. These are the qualifications of the workers that must come to stand before the king Nebuchadnezzar. Now, the 6th one, he says, these people must be trained in the language and in the tongue of the Chaldeans, which means having this qualification and coming from a specific class is not enough. As you come into the palace has a culture, the palace has a lifestyle, so they must be trained in the language and in the tongue and in the culture, in the procedures and protocols of the palace. What does this imply in the New Testament? If you are going to be a church worker in the church, you must understand that your experiences and whatever you brought from the outside world, when you enter into the church gates to be a worker in the kingdom, you must be open to be trained. You must learn the culture of the church. You must learn the language of the church. You must learn the tongue of the church. The church is a kingdom of its own that has its principles laid out. So to qualify as a church worker, you must align yourself on these things or in these things so that you will become a qualified church